If there's no field of value, there's nothing to transmit. Right? There's nothing to say. If wisdom's not real, we just have avant-garde, what happens to be newest. And we have to actually become wisdom keepers. And what Soryu is trying to do at the Monastic Academy, what we're trying to do in the Center for World Philosophy and Religion, is enact a world religion. We call this one method, many paths. And a world religion, which is a context for diversity, or another way of saying that is a shared story of value, a shared grammar of value, a vision of what our friend Barbara Marx Hubbard used to call a planetary Pentecost. We call it a planetary awakening in love through unique self-symphonies. Last week we did a lot, right? So it was a huge, I think we did almost a couple of hours last week, and we did an entirely new topic, right? Which is to actually enter reality through the prism of conversation. And this notion that Messiah, Mashiach, means siach, means conversation. Messiah is our capacity to have a conversation. So this week we're having a conversation. What could be better, right, than to have a conversation? So we have a very exciting conversation. And in about a minute, David's going to read the Evolutionary Love Code for this week. And then I'm going to have a conversation on that love code with a very, very dear friend, brother, and a great and wonderful teacher. But teacher is only one dimension. He's a teacher, entrepreneur, innovator, visionary, and kind of a gorgeous expression of what's possible, right? In actually enacting the Buddhist possibility, the Buddhist instrument of the unique self-symphony on the world stage. And he's working closely with the center. He's the head of the Monastic Academy in Vermont, which is the Monastic Academy for the preservation of life on Earth. And it's a monastic academy, which, much like the think tank, is directly facing into existential risk, facing into the meta crisis, and seeking in the most embodied way to literally practice, to enact, right, a response. And so the Monastic Academy and the Center for World Philosophy and Religion have come closely together, each, of course, completely autonomous, completely independent, not in any way, no sense of merging, but not even a sense of union, more a sense of deep partnership, deep shared vision, and deep love right at the center. So Soryu Forall, who's the head of the Academy and the founder of the Academy, is going to be with me today to talk about our Evolutionary Love Code, and it's going to be a crazy, great conversation. Okay, so Dave's going to read the code, and then I'm going to introduce Soryu, and we're going to start the conversation.
Thank you, Dr. Mark. So if you're new here, we have a code that we share every week that really grounds the conversation, that puts a framing of the Dharma, of the teaching, so that you can really kind of keep your attention focused here. So I'm going to resonate the code and put it in the chat box. Here it is. All right. So there are two forms of existential risk: the death of humanity and the death of our humanity. Artificial intelligence potentially participates in both. Bringing the creators of AI and the process of developing AI into the field of value is an overriding moral imperative of our time, upon which the future of reality as we know it depends. So there are two forms of existential risk: the death of humanity and the death of our humanity. Artificial intelligence potentially participates in both. Bringing the creators of AI and the process of developing AI into the field of value is an overriding moral imperative of our time, upon which the future of reality as we know it depends. And with that, I transition to our conversation with Dr. Mark.
I'm going to actually introduce the conversation and then turn it to Soryu to chat. I think for two reasons. The minor reason is I think it's going to be much easier with one computer. But the much more important reason is that we're in a deep conversation, all of us, every week. And I think it would actually, the better way to do it would be this week, just kind of feeling into it, is let me just frame the conversation we've been in here this week and just put it really in 2.5 minutes, right? We've been in this very deep dive here at the Monastic Academy. We're on our third, right? So we're on our third retreat together, brother, right? Where we're talking about the enactment and the dharma of the Great Library of Cosmologic Humanism, but we're talking about in the context of what would it mean to enact a world religion as a context for our diversity. And we've been discussing existential risk in response to what we call techno-feudalism, that you've heard lots of us talk about, but not as technologists. We're interested in the field of value. And what we're saying is that the critiques of the potential existential risks, death of humanity, death of our humanity, that are taking place in the world now actually fall flat because they don't enter the field of value. So just one example, and then I'm going to turn it to Soryu to talk about, but just one example. So if you read core critiques of the structure of social media and how it capitalizes and how it manipulates and the damage that it does, right, to children, to adolescent girls, right, to suicide rates, right, but more than that, right, to people's experience of their own personhood, to free will, right, this kind of upgrading of algorithms and downgrading of human beings, right, this hijacking of attention, right, this whole story that we've talked about in an enormous amount of depth over the years, last 3 years. For us, we're approaching this as this is a failure of value. Attention is a value. You don't get to hijack it. Attention is a value, therefore it's a right. You don't get to hijack it. That's the context for our conversation. What we're saying is you can't actually critique the techplex without actually talking about the field of value. And that's been the context of our conversation. So what I'm going to do is actually, we're going to do this conversation a little bit differently. We've been talking all morning, so we're in conversation already. So I'm going to, and I think it's also just going to be really beautiful for everyone. I'm going to just turn the floor, right, to Soryu to come in and talk about this that he's been thinking about for many years. He's enacted the academy to engage it, and he'll step into this from whichever door feels best to him. Okay, so welcome, Soryu Forall. Let's give him a big hand, everybody.
Appreciate it. So we're in a little room here in the Monastic Academy. There are 7 of us in here setting up this magnificent event. And this event that we're a part of, this gathering about techno-feudalism, has been magnificent. It's been deeply satisfying. And one of the reasons it's been so satisfying is that we're in a position together to find it to be horrifying. Certain aspects of this new world terrify us. There is, as Rabbi Marc just mentioned, a tendency toward the control of attention, the control of the human mind. And the desire to control the human mind and to turn the human mind into something that will convert the field of value into profits. This is terrifying to us. Significantly, it's not terrifying to many people, in particular the people who are bringing forth this world. Beyond that, there is a desire in this techplex to convert even biological life into some new kind of being, some vast silicon-based intelligence that is able to predict and therefore manipulate, to control, well, the planet, but even more than that. In fact, the real goal is the galaxy, and at some point, who knows, the vision might get even bigger. So we're talking about the destruction of the mind, the destruction of the body, and we find it terrifying. We find it horrifying. Significantly, when I speak with the people who are bringing this about, they're not terrified. They're not horrified. They're concerned. They're often concerned. They know, they acknowledge that they don't understand what is good, that they don't know how to bring about a world the world that they envision. And so while there are some concerns, there isn't a sense of horror. And the question is, why? Why isn't Silicon Valley filled with panic at their own inability to quit their current direction? The Buddha spoke about this question. It may seem that he couldn't have. It may seem that these are all new problems, and someone who lived 2,500 years ago couldn't have discussed it. But actually, these aren't new problems. This is the most recent iteration of a problem that has been happening for, well, a long time. You might say 70,000 years, and you might, as a Buddhist, I would say even longer than that. And that problem is mistaking our view of things for the field of value itself. This error in thinking I can mentally grasp the mystery. That belief that the mental grasp of the mystery allows me to produce the value of that mystery. That is a deep confusion. And if we go back to, for example, the time of the Buddha, what the Buddha did was often not understood, but it's worth discussing so that we can get into this age. It may seem strange to go back 2,500 years to understand something that's happening right now, but bear with me, come along on this trip for a second. What had just happened in the Buddhist civilization was radical. Namely, it had become agricultural. And nowadays, we may not think that that's radical, but the agricultural revolution was a complete shift on this planet. One of the most important shifts that's ever happened. And the Buddha, as a child, saw the farming that was happening, saw the suffering that was being created by that farming, in particular for the animals living in the field, and realized we're making some error. He, at this point, depending on the story, he was 6 or 19 or something, but a young individual. He didn't know how to handle this problem, but he was horrified that his whole civilization was based on this creation of suffering for other beings. And so he began to wonder, what do you do about it? And what he did, in fact, was enter a state of spiritual rapture. Again, maybe when he was 6 or 19 or maybe later. But in any case, he entered a state of spiritual rapture as a solution to this problem. Now, this insight that the correct way to deal with the destruction of life on Earth, and agricultural revolution was an enormous destruction of life on Earth, although not nearly as great as what we're seeing now. The realization that an appropriate response to the destruction of life on Earth is entry into spiritual bliss. This, I'd suggest, is the radical insight on which our collaboration, our brotherhood is based. For many people, it's not intuitive. In particular, I'd say that it's not intuitive in the modern existential crisis. In this meta crisis, we don't see that one of the issues, one of the crises, is a lack of spiritual bliss, a lack of a transcendent kind of pleasure. A unification with, a merging with, an intimacy with all things beyond separation that results in a reverberation of wonder and joy throughout the body that squeezes out delusion. Now, this for many people seems crazy. You wouldn't possibly change the world that way. But there is no doubt that the Buddha changed the world. That moment of realization of this is the way, that changed world history. And right now, we're in a situation of existential risk. In fact, we've seen all the more species destroyed, incomparably more, in fact, than the agricultural revolution over the course of the Industrial Revolution. But no one in the Industrial Revolution, no one who is dealing with that social crisis was able to forward a solution to the problems that included spiritual bliss. So who was responding? Well, Adam Smith was responding. Karl Marx was responding. These are the kinds of prophets of the industrial age. Both of them, in fact, were philosophers, were trained in philosophy, in moral philosophy, and thought of themselves as philosophers, not so much as economists. And yet they were unable to enter into and communicate this solution of deep pleasure beyond separation. Because of that, we have continued to destroy life on Earth. The kinds of solutions that the Buddha offered couldn't be incorporated into our society. There wasn't, for example, a monastic complex of people who were living without harm and guiding society into harmony with life on Earth. We see that because he did that, India, even though it was the most dominant civilization and economy on the planet, did far less harm over 2,000 years than we have done since our industrial revolution in just a few hundred years. So what is it about this past few hundred years? What is it about the change in our views, the change in our minds that has resulted in this destruction? It is specifically that more and more our view is that we should be able to mentally grasp nature such that we are able to predict, manipulate, and control as a path to happiness. Instead of that, we as spiritual practitioners take a different approach, which is by escaping from the mind that grasps, we directly encounter nature. We become part of this beauty and participate in its flourishing. These are two completely different approaches. And over the past few hundred years, there has been a religious revolution that states that the ideal case is that you can grasp, manipulate, predict, and control. That isn't just good for you, but that is what good is. That is the evidence that you are a good person, the ability to create in that way, in that specific strategy. This view, this approach, this mind of grasping, of clinging, of manipulating, of controlling, this mind is destructive to the planet, and it is destructive to us in this moment. The moment we engage it, we know the suffering that comes with it. The reason I bring all this up in leading up to this moment is that, yes, the Buddha discussed this topic because he pointed out that the mind of grasp, manipulate, control is the source of suffering. Right now, we have on the global scale a mind of grasping, observing, predicting, manipulating, controlling, from a position of separation, separated from each other by data. Within that context, we connect. This is very different from a mind of escaping from separation in order to merge with, become intimate with. Because this has been taken to its historical extreme, we are destroying life on Earth. Now, this has been happening for a long time. It bothers me when people say, someday we might destroy life as we know it. We already destroyed life as it was 1,000 years ago, 100 years ago, and even 10 years ago. That has happened. The problem, the big issue is not that somehow in some objective way we will destroy life as we know it. That has been done. The problem is that even though we have destroyed life as we know it, we don't grieve. That's the issue that we have to resolve. When will we start grieving? When will we see that we have done the unconscionable, the horrifying sin of destroying life? That moment of grieving is what we're looking for. And that moment of grieving is also the moment of opening up and finding intimacy, finding connection, finding vulnerability. So at this moment, we have another revolution happening. It's not the Industrial Revolution, and it's not the Agricultural Revolution before that. It's now the data, the information, the algorithmic revolution. What's needed is that just as the Buddha did, entering right into an agricultural society in order to discover how to create right within it a community of people who are able to live in alignment with true meaning, with true value. Right now, we need to enter right into this techplex, this enormous global internet communication system, this huge global mind, enter right into that mind without separation and add to it direct insight into spiritual joy, into non-separation, into the manifestation of our care for all beings. That's what's needed. And if you doubt that that's what's needed, if you think, no, that isn't what's needed, then I would suggest that you are, as we love to say, performing a contradiction. I'd suggest that you're a hypocrite. Because here you are. This is what we're doing on this computer right now. We are, in fact, entering into this global nervous system, as they call it. We are entering into this vast global mind that brings us, technology, into one single entity, and we are adding right to it the direct experience of spiritual bliss, of non-separation, of clarity regarding the deep value of all beings, and a forwarding of these traditions in this current world. So right now, we are here together, and many people, we have about 50 people here now, in a deep discussion about techno-feudalism. And we are enacting, we are doing what we are recommending. We are not performing a contradiction. We are not just saying, hey, someone should really enter into this techno-feudalist age and offer spiritual insight and joy, and then going off and doing something else. We say that, and as we say it, we're doing it. Right now, as I'm saying these words to you, I am doing them. I'm experiencing connection with you. I'm experiencing connection with the people here, with all beings. And you also are experiencing that. We're right in the middle of this, infusing it with the solution, not just talking about the solution. We are injecting the solution into this crisis. That doing of it is what we were just discussing just now, right at the end of our last segment. We were talking about what is it to do that? What is that we are doing? And I'll finish and then hand it back over to you, Mark. And then you might hand it back over to me. I don't know, but a little bit of a conversation might be helpful. But I want to finish with a quick story because the question doesn't matter too much. It was an interesting question, but we were there in the main hall talking, and someone asked a question, a deep question, a meaningful question. Well, maybe I'll just repeat the question. It's worth it. The question was, okay, so the techno-feudalist overlords might be wrong. We claim that their basic view is incorrect. I claim that. You claim that, correct? Their basic view is incorrect. And as the Buddha said, mind is chief. The mind that you have creates the life that you live, which creates the world you live in. Now that world then creates your mind. So it's not that mind is somehow independent, but mind is your lever. Mind is the place where you can take action. And then the other actions follow from there. So it's about purification and cultivation of mind. Well, these individuals have cultivated a certain kind of mind that is not, as we might say, pure. And so it's incorrect. Because it's incorrect, it's harmful. We claim that. And she was saying, okay, so they see the world incorrectly. They have an incorrect view of the world. Does that mean that their project of creating a techno-feudalist world won't work? They're wrong about reality. Does that mean that they will fail at their project? Will their dream fail to come into being? And immediately, without hesitation, Mark and I gave the same answer right away. It was immediate, but as soon as she was finished answering, we both yelled out the answer. And we just used two different words for the answer. I said, yes, and he said, no. And then we spent about 10 minutes clarifying how we are describing the same phenomenon. I'm describing it, I'm answering from their perspective, and you're answering from our perspective. And in that way, you'd say yes and no. But that isn't, and we can, if you wish, we could explain why I said yes and you said no. I actually might have said no and you said yes. I said no, he said yes. So there we are. So that's how it happened.
Didn't want to get into that.
Yeah. So, but that's even more fun. It doesn't really matter. The point is that we don't even need to remember who said which thing, because night and day don't contradict. Yes and no don't contradict. Yes and no don't need to pull apart. Yes and no in this mind of non-separation, yes and no can complete each other. Yes and no can produce the conversation that clarified the full answer to the whole group. It's quite encouraging that such a profound question can be asked. A question that Rabbi Marc Gafni and myself, that we've considered carefully, and we both feel strongly about this. We're passionate about this. We're not saying just a merely philosophical answer. I said no, is that right? Is that what I said? I said no? I said no. Okay. When I said no, I meant it. I wasn't just saying the first thing that came to mind. I've thought about this carefully, and that my no, if that is what I said, which it may not have been now that I think about it more, I think I actually might have, I think I might have reported the question. I think it was the question was in the other direction. It wasn't, it doesn't matter. It doesn't make any difference. Beyond all of these words, I was saying something that I am staking my life on. You were saying something that you're staking your life on. I am risking my life for this. To the point that I don't care if it's a yes or a no or anything. The thing that is happening in the training I did in Japan, in the Zen training, I trained in many Buddhist traditions, but one of them was Zen, and it was in Japan, and so the Japanese language was spoken. And there's a term called inochi gake. Inochi gake literally means life hanging. But that isn't the feeling of it. The feeling of it is that you're risking your life. It has the sense of you're just barely holding on to the edge of a cliff. Your life is hanging in the balance, something like that. When I said my answer, that's where I was at. I'm giving everything to this answer. You are giving everything to this answer. Everything given. At that moment, words cannot be the kind of thing that divide. Words are the kind of thing that produce a conversation that connects and completes. That we can do that with yes and no indicates that we can do that with 1 and 0. That we can do that with these machines. That we can find a way to turn these machines into the kind of thing that produces global intimacy. And so I'm very happy that we're here working on that together, and that everyone at this beautiful gathering is directly infusing the internet, directly infusing this revolution with such love and such intimacy.
Beautiful. 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 Thank you. Thank you, Soryu. And, so yeah. So let's see if we can kind of feel into, first off, you just, what do y'all think about my taste in friends? Awesome. Right? Like awesome. So I'm gonna say a couple of things and we'll chat a little bit. But first, it's a funny thing. We did an event. A couple of you were probably there. It was in 2010. And I did it with my friend Ken Wilburn. We called it the Integral Spiritual Experience. And at the event, there were about, I'm looking over, Soryu was over here, right? There must have
I
been
wasn't
about,
there, so I don't have any idea.
were there, David? Yeah. Like 500-600 people, something like that, the first one, and 50, 60 teachers. And I called all of the teachers, and invited them specifically to come, and some of them were colleagues. And the first event, the second event, and actually KD Krishnadas got up and gave kind of a long, funny talk about how, when Rabbi Mark calls, you can't say no, although he has managed to do so several times since. But it was, but at the event, I took over personally the job of introducing people. It's interesting because there were people who I had asked to introduce, but I noticed that everyone introduced with a kind of holdback, kind of pullback, because everyone was teachers and no one quite wanted to introduce everyone with kind of full delight. So the beginning of spiritual bliss and joy is that we get to take full delight and joy in a friend and a great teacher, and to really just welcome him with the true honor that he deserves. So I just really want to just say that Soryu is doing something unique, gorgeous, deep, important, special in the world. And paradoxically, and this is This is why people fail on introductions. They feel they should be doing it. I couldn't do it. It's his to do, right? The path that he's walked, the way he's done it, the grace, the beauty, the depth, the courage, the ferocity, the fierceness, the tenderness. It's all uniquely Soryu, and it's gorgeous. And my dear student and friend and co-president of the center and initiate and part of David J. Temple, Zach Stein, introduced me to Soryu. And I want to tell you all, this is just between us. The real action is when Soryu, Zach, and I get together and eat Chinese. Just saying. Now, here's the funny thing. So we might think that's funny, or you might think it's not funny, and I don't write these lines, and I'm really sorry. Okay, I got that problem also. Okay, but here's the thing: there's this very beautiful category in early 19th century literature, in Hasidic texts, that talk about the expansion of the conversation. In other words, the classical liturgy is about the sacred conversation. And along comes the Baal Shem Tov, the master of the good name, and he says, no. You great masters, don't say there's a sacred conversation. Say the ritual is a sacred conversation. That the liturgy is a sacred conversation. And when you're not in sacred conversation, you'll go into what's called a tanit dibur. You'll fast in speech. You'll enter into silence, which is what many of the masters were doing. He was saying, don't do that. That is not where it is. He said, go and enter into sichat chulin. Go and enter into conversation between friends and between brothers that take place in the ordinary places, and listen into those conversations. Those are the holiest conversations. That's when you really know what's happening. So if you would eavesdrop on a conversation between Soryu and Zach and I, where often for at least half of the conversation, we're not talking theology, or, we're talking about things like, there's broccoli, and you can get tofu with the broccoli, and you can get $2 of tofu, $3, 4 or 5. So we're talking about how much tofu we get with the broccoli. That's kind of our right, and by the way, Soryu generally goes for about 2 or 3. Zach 4, and I go for 5. I think.
Yeah.
I'm just saying, but not that there's any rivalrous conflict. None of that going up here, right? Just saying, right? But actually, the truth is that when brothers and teachers can get together and laugh and be in friendship and sisterhood or brotherhood, then already we have the beginning of the new world. It's deep. It's deep. There's a reason, right? In the spiritual field, the conversation itself is broken. And it's the spiritual bliss and joy that Soryu described that should exist between teachers barely does. You can barely get a conversation together that's not about monetizing and clicks and exchanges and disguised conversations about fame and fortune. And the notion of reverence for each other, the notion of genuine teacher-student relationship, the notion of love between teachers, the notion of honoring each other, right? The notion of being post-guru, but the embrace of teacher as a real structure in society. We've given it over to TikTok, right? We've lost intergenerational transmission. We've lost the notion, right? We would never go into, let's give you an example. We would never go into physics and sit down with, I don't know, Steven Weinberg, who won the Nobel Prize on muons, and say, let's talk about muons. You'd look at me, you've never trained in muons. I said, oh, stop pulling hierarchy on me. It's like strange, right? And so what Soryu's trying to do, I just want to share with you a little about him. That's really my conversation, is he's created in the monastic academy a world which is both post-guru and I would say the old shadow trappings of what's called guru, and yet very strong central transmission teacher who takes an enormous amount of responsibility. He takes karmic responsibility, and in the best way that he can, for creating the space and for creating this world. And he's modeling in the world at a very deep and profound way of enacting this particular role, and which transcends and includes, if I can say subtly, right, the important dimensions, right, of this relationship. And that's itself the beginning of something. In other words, in order to have spiritual bliss and to have spiritual joy, we have to actually know how to learn. We have to know how to train. We have to be willing to train our minds and to train with mad joy, right? To train with mad delight, but also with mad devotion, with blood on the ground in the best sense of the way. When I say blood on the ground, I don't mean spilled blood. I mean complete dedication, right? There's nothing I enjoy more than learning. Someone who can open my heart, open my mind. And so I'm going to just, I'm spending my time kind of not an existential risk, but I would say that directly, but I kind of talking about and having a conversation about my conversation partner, because I just want to model what that is. First of all, everything I'm saying is true, and there's so much more that's true. And just to say, that's what we mean. That's part of conversation. That's what we talked about last week. How do we have our conversations? How do we introduce each other? How do we talk to each other? How do we hold each other? And I would say, Soryu, that if we could actually reclaim conversation, and we can, I'm going to alternate. I got. If we could reclaim, I'm going to turn that. If we could reclaim conversation, we could reclaim laughter, and we could reclaim teachers loving each other, people might first off begin to trust teachers again, right? In a way where that contract has been broken in part by teachers, right? There's been violations of that contract, and then many students have broken that contract. Students have an equal responsibility, right, to integrity, to honesty, to goodness, right? So there's been breakings of that, and one of the institutions we need to reclaim or to respond to existential risk is actually create a conversation where actually there's a transmission, there's an exchange, there's something important that happens. Now, here's the thing. If there's no field of value, there's nothing to transmit. Right? There's nothing to say. If wisdom's not real, we just have avant-garde, what happens to be newest. And we have to actually become wisdom keepers. And what Soryu is trying to do at the Monastic Academy, what we're trying to do in the Center for World Philosophy and Religion, is enact a world religion. We call this one mountain, many paths. And a world religion, which is a context for diversity, or another way of saying that is a shared story of value, a shared grammar of value, a vision of what our friend Barbara Marx Hubbard used to call a planetary Pentecost. We call it a planetary awakening in love through unique self-symphonies. And so this is just the beginning of that conversation. We've had an incredible, 2 days here. And I think about 50 of us gathered to really go deep into the field of value and the field of practice together. And so I'm gonna turn to Soryu and maybe with a last word, and he'll give like a concluding set of reflections. We had a beautiful morning this morning and yesterday morning. I just want to share with people that it's a very deep, beautiful practice here at the center, which is, I would say, it's classical Zen and much more. It includes, you can feel the depth of Zen transmission, and then deep kind of entrepreneurial sacred innovations in the practice. We did a very deep prayer practice, and you could feel the enacting of a new space. Not talking about it, but actually being it, being the water, right? Being the love, but the love not in the surface sense, but in the sense of the very Eros value of cosmos that animates all that is. And so just like, it's such a crazy joy to be with everybody in one mountain. And that is what this space is. And really, thanks to Jacqueline, to David, and to Suzette, and to Christina, and to Krista, right? And to others, we've created a space here where you can feel the depth of devotion, the depth of integrity, and the depth of goodness, and the depth of sanity, right, in this place, like you can feel it at the Monastic Academy. And so I'm gonna turn to Soryu to close with whatever is moving his heart as he hears these reflections, and just insane, crazy joy and privilege, right, to be with everyone. And after Soryu, we're going to turn to Krista, who's going to take us home.
I'd like to say a few more words about this morning and yesterday morning.
Yeah, please.
So we begin, usually around here we begin at 4:30, but we've adjusted the schedule somewhat. And so at 6 o'clock, we begin chanting Buddhist liturgy. And we do that from a few different traditions. None of them are particularly Zen, but all of them invite us into, as I was saying, a certain mind. a mind in which we transform the world not by mentally grasping on to it, but instead by escaping from our minds, meeting it directly and becoming a part of its purification and coming into Buddhahood. We then, having chanted, and I should mention, in case any of you ever come and visit, that the morning chant is very energetic. It's loud. Everybody's whole body is moving as we chant, all the way down to your core, really into it. And there's absolutely nothing left out. That's the point. Everything should be completely unified. Not a single thing is left out. And then with that energy, we enter into meditation. And we'd like to maintain that same energy through the entire meditation. But now it is so frictionless in the meditation that it is indiscernible. It is unobservable. It seems like stillness. And it seems like stillness because there's no friction. And yet that same vast energy continues to flow, even as we are in stillness. And then this morning and yesterday, we then gave the floor over to Rabbi Marc, and he took over in his very energetic, frictionless way. And the whole Zendo began, the whole meditation space began resonating with that song, with that heart, with that connection. And then we finished and we came to breakfast and could continue to celebrate for the day. Now, each of these points is worth celebrating. But what you're sensing here in this conversation is a window into something that is happening. The something is that two traditions are not only leading the world in this moment of crisis, but are meeting each other in the moment of crisis. And the challenge of supporting, occasionally informing each other in such a way that not only do we not collapse into a kind of a forced, shallow unity, but instead the surface diversity is a demonstration of a unity that is, as I say, indescribable, unobservable, can't be seen. And yet it can be done. We are doing it together. It's happening. And it's happening in this conversation. It's happening right now. And I'd like to finish by pointing out that since we are focusing on techno-feudalism, beyond that, it is happening in the internet right now. We are actually doing it. It's in Buddhism, we say that you can have the thought of enlightenment, which is a very subtle concept in Buddhism. Some of you probably heard of it. It's bodhicitta. It's a very complex and very subtle teaching. But one way to translate it, just one little bit of it, is the thought of enlightenment, the aspiration for enlightenment. Some bit of you can have the thought of enlightenment. And even though the rest of you wants to eat cookies and wants to think about that thing you should have said to the person who said that other thing to you yesterday and wishes to gain power over and all of that, even though so much of us has all these difficult afflictions, that little thought of enlightenment within you can change your life. And we regularly see that it changes someone's life. We are the thought of enlightenment. We are doing that right now and infusing that into this vast, non-separate collective mind. And we're doing it not only that, but right within the very great challenge of these devices, which were not designed for this, but can be designed for this. It's by demanding that, it's by living the thing that calls that forth, that different structure will be invented, will be conveyed to the world. So in the morning, it's happening. Right now, it's happening. And as terrified, as horrified as I am about what's happening today on the planet, as we claim that none of this has value and therefore justify destroying it, as terrified as I am about that, as much as that drives me with passion to face and transform the problem, I'm also struck with the joy and the gratitude of doing it together and of finding a path that none of us could have found alone.
Amen. Beautiful. Beautiful. Thank you. Thank you. Right. It's a beautiful moment. And it's thank you so much, Soryu. What a great delight. And we're at a beginning. We're at a beginning. We're at a beginning. And
thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. There we go. There we go. Right. And what we're gonna do is we're gonna close with just a simple chant like we often do. So I'm gonna do one chant, and then Soryu will do the second chant, and then we'll close.
Great.
Okay, like that. Okay, so we'll just close in some moment of actual practice. We'll turn to Kristen and we'll close. Okay. And maybe just to share the last thing, we're very, very proud in a sense of divine pride of One Mountain. So there's been many people have told me over the years, just do straight podcast analysis stuff. Don't do right, if you want to build One Mountain. No, but this is a community of practice at its core. And we study out of the context of being a community of practice. So what a joy to be together, and thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. Hey, 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 ho, ho. Hey, 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 ho. Hey, 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 ho, ho. Hey, 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 ho. Hey, 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 yo, ho, ho, ho. Hey, 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 ho. Hey, hey, ho, ho, ho. Hey, hey, ho, ho, ho. Hey, hey, yo, ho, ho. Hey, hey, ho, ho, ho. Put it up. Hey, 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 feel it open up. Hey, hey, ho. Hey, ding, hey, 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 ding, hey, hey, ding, hey, hey, ding, hey, ding, hey, hey, ho, ho, ho. Hey, hey, ho, ho, ho. Hey, hey, la, 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 hey, ho. And of course, and Sir is going to close with a chant, and Crystal will close us. That chant is not a civil religion practice. Chant is in the field of value. Chant is the music of reality. Right? It's the mathematics of intimacy of reality. Right? It's the language of the sacred.
Very good. We have in the Buddhist tradition many different traditions of chanting, many different types of chanting. And here we do many of them. They are very different. The languages are different, the rhythm is different, the melody is different, the significance, the purpose is different. But today we will chant a certain mantra. And mantras are words that are just beyond meaning. Many mantras have no literal significance, but all of them, as Mark was just saying, have spiritual significance, have a true meaning, even if they can't be put into words. Or, I should say, even if their own words are the best words to give that meaning within. But this mantra is well known. It begins, as many do, with the word Om, which again is difficult to translate. But it is what we were just discussing. This vast harmony, field of value, the intimacy of the entire universe, the jewel of the living of the Dharma, the jewel of the Dharma itself, and the jewel of the practice of the Dharma. You might say the Buddha, the Dharma, the Sangha, all of that is put together in this Om. Mani is a simple word, and it has a clear meaning. It means jewel. It's a certain kind of jewel. It's a wish-fulfilling jewel. Padme is the locative case of the word Padma, which means lotus, a lotus flower. And so these two words together mean the jewel in the lotus. There's a jewel in the lotus flower. And then the last word is hum. And hum is a little bit like Amen. May it be so. But again, this is beyond ordinary speech. So, Om Mani Padme Hum is generally understood to mean right within wisdom there is compassion. Right within seeing things as they are is the impetus to be of benefit. Right within understanding the truth, there is love. It's not that you realize the truth and then love is some other thing. So modern religions would say that. They would say something can be true and not good. A scientist, so folks like us, if we teach something is true and then we do something bad, everyone doubts if that was ever true to begin with. Scientists can say this is a true theory, then they kill someone, rape someone, but the theory stands. This is because in that religion, truth and goodness have been separated. And this mantra claims you cannot separate them. It is not true if it's not good, and it's not good if it's not true. That's that. And then we chant the mantra to realize that, to directly encounter that. So it's Om Mani Padme Hum, and I will also do it in similar way. I'll start slowly. There'll be a crescendo, and then we'll slow down. We'll begin. Om Mani Padme Hum. Om Mani Padme Hum. Om Mani Padme Hum. Om Mani Padme Hum. Om Mani Padme Hum 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 Om Mani Me Hum Om Mani Padme 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 Hum Om Mani Hum Om Mani Padme Hum Om Mani Padme Hum Om Mani Padme Hum Om Mani Om Mani Padme Hum Om Mani Padme Hum Om Mani Padme Hum Om Mani Padme Hum Ni Padme Hum Om Mani Padme